Hi, welcome to the Tech Always podcast, where we unpack the people, the capital, and the ideas which shape the technology in Africa. On today's episode, I'm with Timm, a journalist and researcher with over 25 years of writing on small businesses and startups. He's currently a regular contributor to Brainstorm, an IT web publication. So he recently wrote and published an article called The Six Startups to Watch in 2026 in South Africa. And I thought it was a really insightful article. So I thought I should kind of try to bring him on to really try to unpack these companies, but more importantly, what their trajectories reveal about the future of technology in Mzansi. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the podcast, man. How are you?
Hi, Ephraim. No, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How's Cape Town?
We're in for a balmy night here, but it's going to rain soon. Cape Town, even in summer it rains. So we need that. It's hot here at the moment.
Yeah, man. To get straight into it, right? The article, right? So just before we dive into the startups, right? Just give me an idea of why you wrote this article and why you think these particular startups are really interesting as we head into 2026.
Yeah, well, to tell you the truth, I mean, I'm not a big fan of articles where you go. It's like a listicle. You say the top 5, the top 10 of this, the top whatever. Because it's often it's. You get a lot of the time it's just one person's opinion and you get a lot of stuff wrong, and then people email you or post on social media afterwards, oh, you forgot this person or that thing or whatever. So I was kind of to tell you the truth, I was at a loose end, and my editor just basically suggested, well, why didn't we do this, the top 5 startups for 2026 to look out for, So I kind of reluctantly thought, okay, well, and he's like, as long as it's, got some intelligence to it, some analysis, you don't just pick any random companies. So that's what these companies, it ended up being 6. But the thought behind that is companies that are startups that are recently in South Africa got funding, venture capital funding, equity funding, and they represent certain kind of trends. So, that's why there's Stitch for fintech. There's, your agri-tech guys, Kula and Nile. Who else is there? There's CubeSpace for the satellite space technology, which is actually an emerging sector in South Africa, which is people are like, wow, that's South African, 6 companies developing satellites, small companies, but they've already kind of built into 100 plus employees each. And, then Invigilator, which is a big tech company, is probably one of the least known companies. Then there's Aura, which is a company that's developed an ecosystem, basically all the security apps and things that you have or notifications stuff can be brought into one central hub. And they're just getting into America now, which is great.
So, I mean, you covered, startups for a couple of years now. In your opinion, what differentiates between a startup which has a business that can actually scale and work and a startup that just has a bright idea which does not have the fundamentals it takes to be, a scalable business?
I think if you speak to any venture capitalist, it's basically they will tell you it's a company, an entrepreneur is basically solving an idea. So they're always accelerators, business consultants, or whatever. They're always going what are you solving for? That's the whole thing. So if you're not solving a big problem, if there's not a pain that you're, someone, either customers, ordinary people, or businesses themselves are going got this problem here, it's terrible, man. And Africa's full of problems, So that actually means a lot of opportunity. It's just that the problem now is you've got to try and get the finance to solve these problems. And then there's a whole lot of problems around that, where there's a problem, there's an opportunity. But I think there's a lot of people that can, they will do pitching competitions and stuff, and they will come up with great ideas. I think the thing that is important is to actually show that you are making some revenue already. So as a journalist, I'm always asking how many employees do you have? Which markets are you going into? The person says, oh, I'm going into Ghana next year. And then you follow up and the company hasn't gone into Ghana because there's a lot of promises made in the startups, but things always take longer than you think they are. So you want to see some like real traction. I think that's, the tech is cool, but like sometimes it's overhyped. It's always overhyped. So the idea that tech, everything's overhyped, you've got to look at, is this actually making money already? Are there people literally from, within a couple of months, there are people stumbling over, they are going after this company to try and, work with them, that kind of thing. They can't get enough of trying to work with this company. And then I suppose there's always things like, venture capitalists are always trying to look like, do you have a moat built in or whatever? But that's all, like, if you've got a great idea and you're already executing, it's the execution that's the important part, because anyone doesn't matter if they can steal your idea, can they actually put it in place? So you need to be able to hire the right people, and you need to be able to actually hit the road running and create revenue.
I think that's really interesting, especially if we look at the fact that we are at a point where I think a lot of the VC funds which launched around 2021 and 2022 are now at a point where, LPs are like expecting, like a couple of the exits. So the question has now gone from, growth at all costs to, can this business be able to exit? Can it be sold at an outsized return, right?
And especially since COVID, venture capital funds have become a lot more conservative. They want to see reoccurring revenue. There was a lot of money going out in 2021 and 2022, and since then the market, has pulled back, and it's only recovering now. So according to Africa, the big deal, the venture capital funding grew by like 40% in 2025. So in Africa in total. So the market is now recovering, but it did go through a certain period where you had to have a really great business to get funding.
Let's, now get into the startups. I'm going to start with Stitch. I think Stitch has done a lot of, incredible work ever since they came out of stealth around 2021. I used to report on them a lot back when I was still at Techable. In 2025, and just in 2025, they've made 2 acquisitions. They've raised a lot of money, etc. What really, it makes Stitch tick?
I'm not a complete expert on Stitch, but there's a demand for payment solutions, and then also that there's a current drive going on at the Reserve Bank to open up the payment system to non-banks. We're seeing in South Africa, I mean, that's kind of why I mentioned Stitch. It's not just Stitch, but there are other fintech companies that are just going. There's acquisitions going on. This Bank Zero got bought by Lesaka Technologies, and Nedbank bought Icoca. These players are all like lining up because they need payment solutions and that to compete. So I think the market is really, fintech's always been pretty massive, but I think South Africa now especially is a country to look at in terms of, what's going on here. I'm not sure what Stitch is completely doing right here, but they even got burnt in Nigeria, which a lot of companies have. That was back in 2022, and they pulled out. They've continued, so they've not let that affect them.
Whilst we're still on fintech as a sector, we have seen how much it has grown over the last few years. An interesting thing that I've seen perhaps over the last year, 2 years, 2.5 years, is the emergence of the digital assets. A couple of banks have launched offerings on stable coins, etc., etc. How do you think the digital assets are going to impact the competitive environment in fintech in South Africa?
Yeah, the crypto, that whole stablecoin thing and that crypto thing, I think it's moving very slowly in South Africa. There is payments going on, because that's kind of your ultimate test, is if asset management companies are going to let you, invest in crypto assets, or if you can actually use crypto to buy pharmaceutical, medicines or whatever, So there are some retailers like Pick n Pay that are allowing that. But I think it's very small in South Africa still. And Stitch as well, they got a crypto asset service provider license in 2024, but it seems that they haven't really pushed into that space yet, because the CEO was telling Tech Central that the market is still quite small. I think that's pretty accurate. It's smaller than Nigeria. Nigeria's looked like they clamped down there on crypto a bit. So yeah, I think it's still not it's still something you want to keep tabs on and make sure you get in there sometime, but it's not like asset money there. I think the big money there is in the payments space, if you're handling these contactless payments. So if you're in South Africa, people are just paying with their phone now. They don't use cash. people that are especially in their 20s and 30s. So that's how Stitch is. It's that generation that they're tapping into. Tapping means you tap your phone. Yeah, so it's like
it's a nice
that plus the payments system opening up in South Africa, that the Reserve Bank's opening up. And that's why banks are also like suddenly buying like Coca and, Bank Sierra is getting bought by the Cycle Technologies because they're acquiring a bunch of companies to essentially, get a whole portfolio going so they can compete with banks. So I definitely think I mean, like the number of acquisitions, especially exits for fintechs, there were quite a few in South Africa in 2024 and 2025. And I think you're going to continue to see that in 2026.
Apart from fintech, another sector that has been growing quite steadily is agriculture, especially on the technology side. You mentioned two startups, that's Kula and Nail, right? The first question, I'm going to throw at you, right? From what I know about them, and they both seem to operate a marketplace for, for farmers and traders. Yeah. Do you think, as the sector goes, we are going to see more of like a consolidation of these startups because they pretty much kind of have the same product stack? Are we going to see more of like the acquisitions between themselves?
No, that's a good point. And also, I wonder, the market here is pretty dominated by large commercial farmers, and they won't necessarily need an app. It's usually smaller farmers that are looking for buying in bulk, and those kind of. A big farmer doesn't care. They just go directly to they can cut discounts and things. So, I mean, both these companies are like, even Kula is going into Latin America, and you're like, well, why are they getting there suddenly quickly? So it does, and Nile is in a bunch of other countries. I'm not sure, in the rest of the continent and a few other countries. And they seem to be using like a warehouse in somewhere in Gauteng to get their goods. I don't know if it's like into the surrounding SADC countries, because, there's a customs union here. They can just get stuff in. Out into those, Namibia, Botswana, Lesotho, Eswatini. From what I've seen, I'm only focused on South Africa, but from what I've seen, like these kind of agri-tech companies are bigger in a country like Kenya. Kenya's really dominated this area. So it is something to look at as an investor, like food security and all the issues around, if you look at the farm agricultural food chain, there's a whole lot of players, and the farmers get nothing. So by the time you're complaining like how much you're paying for your vegetables or your meat, it's gone through so many middlemen until it gets to the retailer, So obviously if you're a small farmer, you can make savings because you can buy the inputs and you can maybe just get to the marketplace quicker. I included them there because they have landed a lot of finance, but I'm wondering if the market is actually not more outside of South Africa. I mean, I might be proven wrong. I'm not an agri-tech expert. It's nowhere near like, fintech. Fintech is like literally like a third or whatever of the venture capital market in like Africa. So agri-tech is only a slice. And I mean, the bigger one that I haven't mentioned here is kind of renewable energy, which is those companies that are selling like solar power, which is actually big outside of South Africa. That's like, they basically rent solar power units to customers. So that one, in the rest of Africa, massive, but South Africa, that's, bigger utilities are getting involved with renewable energy.
The follow-up question I had was actually around just the sheer amount of capital that these startups have raised. I mean, they've raised in the hundreds of millions, but I looked at the websites, and in terms of the customers and the farmers that they have on their platforms is like around, like 15,000. I just wanted to get your opinion in where is the value? Because I believe that for like investors to write you a check of like 100 million rands, they have to be able to see not only profit, but a return of close to 10x or more, right? So where do you think the value is in these startups?
They're creating sort of an ecosystem, right? And I'm wondering if I'm supplying manure or something like organic fertilizer, let's say, rather than just importing it, which a lot of fertilizers, I can sell it and then they take a cut from that too. So acting as a central hub, their customer, if you want to put it like that way, is not just the farmer, but it's also the supplier that's putting the inputs in. I mean, ultimately, they're trying to help the farmer, but everyone can benefit from linking up to the farmer, and then they can take a cut from that. I suppose if you are someone supplying something to a farmer, you can reach all these farmers, rather than just having to like drive everywhere where they struggle. Then you're saving some money, so then they should charge you for that kind of thing. So I don't know if that's where the thing is, or if they also landed so much funding because of the possibility, like, okay, we're actually going into a bunch of other markets. Because that's always the thing with how they get this finance, is a lot of it's, by the way, a lot of the venture capital funding, it just goes straight into like social media ads. This is a joke someone told me once in the industry. It's like, here comes 10 million rand or $1 million or whatever, and then like a chunk of that is to like goes to hire people, and then it just goes to marketing, because they got to it's all about customer acquisition. It doesn't matter about your profits yet. You've got to acquire many more customers. That's why it is kind of interesting to say, oh, well, they only got like 15,000 customers, or why are they getting all this money? Maybe the bet is they're going to get they now have to scale it up. So they need money to do that. It is a very interesting kind of circus trying to work out whether the company's going to make money or not. You've got to be nice, but also be critical and thinking and startups never want to reveal everything. So, which is probably why I couldn't really get any responses from Nile or Kula at the time these two companies are going up against each other. So you don't want to tell the market everything. You want to keep your cards close to your chest or whatever.
An interesting point that you stated is that, a lot of the commercial farmers don't really have a need for like these apps, etc. What do you think is going to take to ensure that there's like adoption of like these startups and their technologies amongst big commercial farmers?
Yeah, because the other thing is farmers are sort of conservative. So I think you have to really go for the younger people. And, there's a lot of farming where it's like a lot of older people in South Africa. That's the problem here. So I think if it's a farm and there's, the son is handling the technology side, okay, cool. Or the daughter or whatever, maybe you're like onto something right there, because those people someone is younger, not over 50, no offense to anyone, but a younger person will be like, oh, technology, I'm living in it. So I know that. And I suppose you have to demonstrate. You have to go for someone that's not a complete startup company farmer, but maybe someone that's making some money and they want to become a medium-sized farm or something, like, they want to buy other farms, or they've got a growth mindset. Then you're like, so if you use this app, then you can save this much money, and you got to show them how much you can save, obviously. And then
the next startup we are going to talk about is out of this world in the literal sense. It's CubeSpace, right? They make the technology for the satellites, which are up to 1 ton. In terms of this field, right? I mean, it's been growing like in South Africa a lot. Where do you think it's headed, right? In terms of infrastructure that these startups like CubeSpace are building.
They could be building the stuff going to Mars, we got someone there already who's planning for Mars. So I mean, there's already like 5 or 6 companies, and they're all, I wouldn't really call them startups anymore, but I mean, actually the CubeSpace's media person was like, I don't know if we can call this a startup. And I was like trying to tell him, in tech startup world, it's a very gray thing. What do you call a startup or not? You can be a 15-year-old company and still be a startup. But that's, it's a company that's hasn't been bought out by a major corporate. That's what I was telling him. Like you're still independent, and you're dealing with some exciting innovation. And so I think the thing why these companies are doing so well is because the Stellenbosch University has got some real good brains behind the people, the lecturers and all that are coming out of that university. For quite a few years now, all the people that have started these companies have come from Stellenbosch University. So they've come from, I think there's one in particular university professor that's literally, they've all come off that. So it shows you, and then building it in South Africa, the labor is cheaper. You've got good expertise. You're close to the university. Stellenbosch is quite a nice place to live in, but the mountains, the little countryside setting. I think these companies are going to get bigger, and they're already setting up. I mean, CubeSpace has opened I'm not sure if they've launched it now, but they were planning to launch an office in Dublin, Ireland, and I think it was October or November or something. Obviously, there's no real market in South Africa. We had put out 1 or 2 satellites or something, or 3 or whatever in the history or whatever of South Africa. But the real money is overseas, and the European space sector, or Europe or China even. Or I really think that's a sector that's going to grow very quickly, and it's one that people have completely undercounted.
I was actually in Stellenbosch at the beginning of 2025, and I got the opportunity to tour Technopark. I met like a couple of startups there, and the amount of innovation that's going there is just mind blowing, right? Like
it's a fascinating place.
It's
totally like you're like everything is falling apart in South Africa, and then you go to this place called Technopark, and you're like, where the hell is this? This is like, it's like something from California, man. It's like you think you're in Silicon Valley. Or
it's really, really amazing, right? So how do you think in terms of the ecosystem? I mean, if you compare, like Stellenbosch and Cape Town and Johannesburg, in terms of the hub, do you think that in the next year or two, like Stellenbosch is really going to like outpace the other two?
When these venture capital surveys look at the VC ecosystem in South Africa, Stellenbosch is often grouped with Cape Town. I mean, it's literally like, a 45-minute drive, 50, 60 kilometers away from South Africa, from Cape Town. So it's pretty much the same area. And a lot of the wealthy people in South Africa kind of into innovation and technology, they are based in Cape Town. And Cape Town is literally, I think, it's like, Joburg has emerged recently as quite a center for fintech, since about 2018 or 17. But Cape Town is still the place where if you want to be a startup in South Africa, I think you want to be there. It's the place where you go to. Johannesburg is more of a corporate, mining, banks and whatever. So like Cape Town is more like make your own startup. And I think it's also the people always talk about this kind of like natural setting. You're going to have the brains, you're going to have the money, you have to have a nice place to live. And Cape Town, I'm from Cape Town, so maybe I'm biased here, but Cape Town, got in a mountain, sea, loads of tourists coming in going, wow, this place is incredible. Johannesburg, currently, everything is falling apart there. They can't even not being administered properly. So it has potential, and in quite a few surveys, Johannesburg is like sort of taken over from Cape Town in terms of the amount of money that's going to startups that's in the Johannesburg ecosystem. But you'll probably find that a lot of that money is actually coming from people that are in either LPs or the angel investors are probably sitting in Cape Town or maybe even Amsterdam or something. And Johannesburg it's 2 or 3 times, Gauteng, Johannesburg, Pretoria, it's I think 3 times the population of Cape Town or something. So you hopefully expect a lot of bright people to be there too.
The next startup I feel like is relevant, especially, like if you consider the release of the metric results. It's called the Invigilator, and they do like an interesting product where they kind of help institutions to ensure that students don't cheat in examinations, etc., etc. Just in your opinion, right? How relevant is this as a business in South Africa?
The metric exam last year, the results came out this year. There was a leak, so there's always cheating going. South Africa is a corrupt country. Unfortunately, we've got a culture of cheating, and I think the thing more interesting here with this company Invigilator is the fact that I don't think many people have heard about it. I didn't. Certainly I didn't hear about it. The next thing it's landing like $11 million or something. So I included this company a bit because I just wanted to, my point earlier was that, companies can come from nowhere. This company was operating in stealth mode. So literally, so you're like, okay, so $11 million. So surely they had a first round or something, because this was I think what you call basically a Series A in South Africa. But no, they self-funded themselves, bootstrapped, or got some angel funding or something, basically off the radar. And so during COVID, they were building this company up. So I think this is the kind of thing that EdTech is always going to be a sector that's important in South Africa, because we put so much money, this government puts so much money into education, but we have so much bad outcomes. The education level here, and this is not what you would expect with all this money going into education. So I think there are serious problems. This one is just the element of cheating, which is very relevant because now people are using laptops. Ironically, it's probably would have been harder to cheat with notes, with like if you're writing with a pen on a piece of paper. But now how is anyone going to track that if on a laptop? So this one is basically taking screenshots, and there's some other thing it's using. And the interesting thing with this company is that they are like entering other markets very quickly. They in Australia, Latin America, India, I think the US, UK. And that's the thing with startups. As soon as you get funding, the funder will be like, okay, now you have to super scale, so you have to be ready, because I think that growth can kill you that's the kind of thing that kills a small company. If it's not like, oh, I don't have any customers. It's when you have too many and you can't service them. You're falling over, you can't hire enough people to keep up the demand, or you've got to hire the right people and then you hire the wrong people. And it's like it's like when you're growing, your pains are going to be. So I think this is the thing with this kind of company right now, is they only have like 30 to 40 employees. So it's a small company. It's smaller than I think one of the rest of those companies there, Stitch has got 150, CubeSpace, I think also like over 100 and something. To your question earlier, like what does it take for a business? This kind of thing, like right now, this kind of business is going through a growth phase. They've got a lot of money. Yeah, they've got to sort of play it right now to make it sustainable. I think there's also kind of like, there might be some pushback on digital. It was all cool during COVID. People might be moving away from I thought I saw something in Economist recently about this thing about cheating going on online, and they want to move it to like reduce pulling away from online to actually doing the tests like written out, because then it's more difficult to cheat. When you're on your laptop, no one's going to see what you're doing.
Whilst we're still on companies which take what we can perhaps call a uniquely South African problem and using it to scale abroad, the last startup is also kind of doing that also, because if you look at the level of crime, like in South Africa, it's a lot, and the last company addressing that problem, right? How do you see them being able to take that kind of like a solution and then be able to scale it to US, etc., etc.?
Yeah, the company you're talking about there is Aura.
Yes.
So
yes.
They landed quite a lot of money, 13.5 million euros in May last year. And I think the interesting thing about them is actually kind of funny, because they are going into, usually here, everyone has got like armed response, So they don't actually have that in the US. They have, well, if you have an alarm and the alarm goes off, the police have like stopped responding to that, because there's so many false alarms that they have other things to do rather than just respond to all these false alarms. So they've actually seen a gap in the market there. Whereas, like here, you've got an alarm company. They go in, there's a guy with a gun and a bulletproof vest, and it's quite funny that South Africa is on top of this kind of situation. Probably a lot of the other countries in the rest of Africa using this kind of system. Whereas like the US suddenly going like, oh, wait, there's all these people, like the police are going, they were wasting our time. So they were in Kenya already. And I think they also had an office in the UK. And this is like, now they've got a team of 8 there in Dallas in the US. They're already at 130 employees. So it shows you that it's quite a sizable business. And there's 100 in South Africa. And they're quite a good example of, they have an office in Amsterdam as well. That's to raise funding and expanding internationally. So I think the interesting thing here is if they can get, and this is where they use VC funding, is that basically the venture capitalists will help them to expand overseas. Is if they use the South African employees to develop the technology and to respond to requests and all those kind of things, sort of as a back office. And then they expand into other markets, and they can actually compete with other companies, because if they're going to the US, their software development costs are cheaper because they're happening in South Africa rather than in the US. And this is if the government wants to create more jobs, or if South Africa wants to create more jobs, I think this stance, like using South Africa as a back office, and then because the economy here is bad. I mean, it's only been literally growing at about 1% since 2016 or 17. And the GDP per capita is actually less. It's actually lower now than it was in 2017. This was last year that these things came up. So as a business, you don't want to be in a place where there's such low growth. So I think rather let the business expand overseas. We've got good software developers. They can pay higher dollar overseas, but the rate of paying software developers here is way lower than in the US or Australia or the UK or something. So, or Europe. So it makes a lot of sense to try to push into these markets, and then they use sales offices you just have a couple of salespeople there in the US or wherever you go into the US, you just have to open a sales office and some lawyers. And then those kind of, services. And then, the development work's all happening in like South Africa, and then that creates South African jobs. So that's also one of the reasons I'm actually writing a story on that right now. The only thing that's kind of limiting this whole thing is South Africa, we've got this thing called exchange control. So it's to make sure that like quite a number of countries have it, like Nigeria has it, for example, and I think India. So make sure that, people don't go like, oh, South Africa is a bad country, we're just going to take all our money. So all the people with money are just going to be like, send all our money overseas. And then suddenly, South Africa wakes up the next day and they don't have any money. Like it's all been moved to like, I don't know, Switzerland or the US or something. For companies, the same thing. They don't want you to like, if you set up an office overseas, you need to go. There's all these requirements, and it's like you have to pull fast tricks to try and set up an office legally overseas, because they don't want you to like literally have a company that's everyone is based in South Africa, but the actual money and the taxes and everything is being paid like Amsterdam, Switzerland, or wherever. Yeah, so the South African Venture Capital Association and a couple of other partners, they're now apparently working with the Reserve Bank like a sandbox to make it easier for tech companies to set up what you call IP structures. If you want to set up an office in the US or Europe, wherever you're going to go. And often it's not just to expand, it's to get finance there, because the LPs and the venture capital funds, they don't want to put money in like South Africa. What happens if something just goes bust? And this is also, by the way, for like other countries like India, Egypt, Nigeria, probably Botswana, for like Kenya. They'll be like, okay, we'll put money in there, but you got to open up a company in like Delaware or in the US or some other offshore destination. So the money is all housed there and then this company has to be somehow affiliated back to the one that's in Nigeria or South Africa, wherever that's not. This is already a problem. Yeah, so that problem where the investors they want to make sure that when they invest in a company, they're not going to struggle to get their returns back, because maybe the government like decides to wake up the next day and nationalize all the companies or something. You know what I mean? So I think that's going to take a long time to convince them otherwise, because it's a problem affecting in India, for example. All the startups are setting up like entities in Singapore, for example. So it's not just an African thing. It's like everywhere where there's a risk, they try and get away. Yeah, it's just that here you've also got that exchange control thing, which it wouldn't exist if South Africa wasn't seen as a risky destination, because then people wouldn't be like, oh, maybe I should take off all my money offshore. If these countries just put proper governance in place, and made it more attractive to live here and stay here and put money in. I mean, it's a long-term project, but then you don't need exchange control, because then it'll be like, no, I'm going to put all my money in South Africa because that's the future. That's where my kids are going to be. That's where I'm going to live. That's the place I love. Rather than plan B, no, I'm going to run off to Los Angeles or something. No. Until such a time, you've got to somehow allow a model to exist where you can create local jobs, and these companies can still be taxed in like South Africa, right? But they can generate income from the US or whatever. And so, because indirectly South Africa is creating jobs here, it's a very careful tightrope you have to walk, because it's easy to go, oh, startups, yes, they're going to create loads of jobs in South Africa. Next thing, they all move to the US. I mean, you've got to actually be cynical as well. You've got to say, no, wait. Some of these people are just going to just move all their money offshore. So you can't just make it a free-for-all at the moment until the country is in a better situation in a couple of decades, maybe.
If we step back, right, and we look at all these startups, they're creating great tech. They are kind of like trying to address the pain points which are really relevant. What do you think for like a founder who has a startup and they are going to listen to this, right? What do you think they can learn from these startups that you picked for the article?
It's just to indicate where are some of the areas like in South Africa that are like a growth opportunity, whether it's actually the verticals or actually, like university technology is looking good. Servicing offshore clients using South Africa as a back office is looking like a great model going forward. I think if you come up with an idea, you've got to think creatively. You can't just be like, oh, it's about the verticals or it's about this company. There's so many other things in play there, South Africa has to attract and keep like smart people, because that's kind of like how London became a center of like global commerce, and at one time it was like the center of the world. Now it's probably more like New York. Smart people just want to come there and work there and stay there, grow their businesses and everything. I mean, yeah, I should never read too much into lists. It's more like a fun thing. I just want to say this to like anyone that thinks that if you're a startup or a journalist, it's a lazy thing, often a list, because it's like, oh, these are 5 things that you can do and your life will get back into order. No, it's rubbish, man. Learn French in 15 minutes or something. No, bullshit. You got to actually get out there. Sometimes this is also, it's like building a startup. If you keep it in your office the whole time, under wraps, it's when nothing's going to happen. Or you think you're building the perfect company or idea or whatever, it's going to be like a multi-million-dollar, you're going to retire when you're 25. If you don't get out there into pitching competitions, that's when your opportunities come up. And it's the same with like something like Duolingo. If you're like spending 1,000 hours learning French, if you don't just get your butt over to Congo or wherever they're speaking French and actually just like speak to the local people with your rudimentary rubbish French, because you learn more there in like a month or something than you're going to learn like for 12 months, because now suddenly you're in the deep end. And these people are like, if they can respond only back to you in that language, your brain will be like simply blowing up. You'll have to learn, because otherwise you're going to sink. So I think that's the same with building a company. You need to be out there pitching. Like there's a lot of free competitions and like free programs, and you need to like just get in there, because it's also marketing. It's like connections. It's, as a journalist, like, how do I know what's going on there? Which startups are hot? I look at who's raised money. How did the venture capitals people, they look, oh, I don't know this startup before. Oh, wait, no, I do. They've been at this pitching competition. That guy told me about it. This angel investor invested them in because he just arrived at like this co-working place where the business was working and just said, hey, and they start up a conversation. So I think you have to actually be out there and connecting. When you speak to startups, there's a lot of random stories about how they got financed, but they were out there doing stuff. If you're just under the radar, chances are not good that you're going to like get funding or get anywhere. You need to be out there like taking advantage of as many programs and events and things like that. You can just get in there and like make a lot of mistakes. Just make an ass of yourself, because it's better to make mistakes and like then you can learn from them. Because if you don't make any mistakes, how are you going to learn?
As a parting question, right? At the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned, like an important thing, that there's a difference between, like a startup which has a shiny technology and then a startup that has technology that is able to like impact lives and be able to solve problems, right? As we head into 2026 and beyond, right? What do you think it will take to have those kind of startups in South Africa, especially at a time where we are like in the middle of AI wave? So any company that says we are like like incorporating AI is seen as like a big thing. What will it take to build these startups that's going to like really be able to like create jobs and solve problems, etc.?
A couple of years ago, it was blockchain. Everyone was like blockchain, and then you look at them and you're like, you don't need the blockchain to deliver the solution. It's just they like put the blockchain in there either to get some marketing, or to get some attention. I don't think you should be worried that there's always going to be a lot of fluff. That's just the nature of the startup scene. It can be very fickle. But I think the people that stick around are the ones that are actually dealing. After a few times that someone's seen someone with cap videos or whatever, cap app or one of those stupid things, they're not going to really, they're like, okay, you had your chance now it's actually not funny anymore. Like, we don't really care about you. So like, if you want to stick around and develop something, you're going to have to make something that people want. And sometimes they want something stupid. Like, it could be Africa with a lot of social problems like poverty and whatever, but sometimes they're like also people that can just, if it makes you money and you just can do that, then cool. But hopefully there are like startups that can, and that, corporates and big foundations and whatever, they can like, okay, like how do we, because they often come up with idea pitches, or they like, oh, we've got this problem, we need to try and solve it. Sometimes, they're looking for startups. I know it's a lot, a lot of time it's in insurtech and fintech. We're a big company. We don't know we can't be innovative. We need someone that's innovative. And that's where startups come along, because they don't have all the bureaucracy that big companies have. So, there's still a lot of problems, and people shouldn't be dismayed. I think it's another debate for another time, but like where people go like, tech can solve everything, and there are limitations to, like the civic tech things where it helps, like you get an app that helps people become more participate more in like the country, democratically, or like, often those things are like, no, get the people that are actually supposed to do the work, like do the work, or we'll protest, there's a limitation to what, startups can do if you don't have a fully functioning country properly. So I mean, that's like a lesson. Like hopefully people that are in startups can also join government, and then these government people can start a startup, or it can be like they don't have to be stuck in one, and then they can start going, hey, wait, maybe I should think like this. Or I think there's a lot of changes happening, even though the world is like pretty messed up now. There's also a lot of people that are going like Madagascar, and there was Sri Lanka, and there was these protests around the world that young people are just really peed off right now. And Nepal, and I mean, there's a whole list of countries, and it's a serious issue that we had COVID, and a lot of countries got stagnated, or suddenly people realized actually we voted in, they're not really doing anything. So like you need those people to work, and you need then startups will be like, okay, we'll stay here and won't run off to other richer countries. We'll stay here and solve the problem. And then rich countries will be like, hey, we'll invest, we'll send some money to invest in that company there, because they were not going to like seize the money, and government's not going to seize the money and nationalize the country or the company. So the future are these like small innovative companies. I'm not a wholly optimistic person goes like they can solve everything. You need like, why does Africa only get like 2% of, or less than 2% of venture capital funding? It's because everything else is a mess. They want to put money in there, and then, like I said, like have it like swindled away by, some probably provincial politician or whatever just decides to seize it all. So you got to like have the political people have to be, if you want more venture capital funding in Africa, they got to run a clean ship, because then everything else starts, then people want to invest, then the infrastructure improves, then the startups, people don't run off to Europe or wherever, they stay there. The bright people stay there. They build companies. They build new ideas.
I think it's really, like interesting when we're looking at where, like in terms of the VC, where we're going in Africa, because we are at a point where now we have to try to build companies which are not just trying to grow at all costs, but like we have to try to build, companies which are going to, provide returns to investors and also be able to create jobs, etc., etc. It's been a pleasure, Stephen. We've spoken quite extensively. I think it's been like an hour plus. I appreciate your time so much, time to come onto the podcast and, expound more and everything. And man, I look forward to like engaging more, right?
Cool, man. Thank you for the opportunity. It was great talking to you.
All right. I share Stephen, man.